Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. When you think about young children and play, the public library might not be your first thought, but an initiative in rural Kansas is changing that, using play to teach, encourage, and support families in their communities. In this episode, I'm talking with Tammie Benham, Youth Services Consultant for the Southeast Kansas Library System. Tammie believes that where libraries, children, and families intersect, magic is possible. And she's set out to make that magic through a family engagement program focused on play in the library. I first met Tammie at an early childhood conference where I was speaking about play, and she was so enthusiastic and so excited about what she was doing, bringing play into the libraries. We talked for a while. I got her card. We stayed in touch. And as I've been able to see her project unfold, it's really, really amazing. One of my favorite things Tammie said actually came up in our conversation after we had officially ended our podcast discussion, but it captures so much of her vision and her passion. So here's that short exchange. Well, and I remember those days of a handful of preschoolers at home, and the trip to the library was a highlight. It's one of those warm memories that I have when my kids were really little of those library days. It's a really impactful time in a young child's life, but in a young parent's life also.
We have the opportunity to do that as a public library. And the part about making sure that your staff understand what to expect from young children is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And we shouldn't underestimate that. I can remember the first library we implemented, the director walked around and told her staff, it's going to get louder. It's okay. She just repeated it for months before the families started showing up, just to prepare them so that they knew that it would be okay.
It's
We
okay
knew
to be
we were
noisy
going
in
to
the
get,
library.
yeah, we knew that we were going to get some feedback from other patrons. Oh, it's really noisy over there. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because the library's for everyone, including little kids.
The library is for everyone, including little kids. I am so excited for you to hear about what Tammie has envisioned and implemented and grown in the state of Kansas. And she's excited to network with others who would like to do the same. You can find contact information for Tammie in this episode's show notes, along with more information about her program and other links, tidbits, and resources at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 71. Before we jump in, I wanted to share a quick email that made my day. In February, I did a month-long series called Why We Play. It was a lot of work, and honestly, sometimes when you get up to your eyeballs in a project like that, you start to wonder if it means as much to anyone else as it does to you. Toward the end of the month, I got an email from a teacher named Mary that let me know that it was all worth it. She said this: I couldn't have found you at a better time. I'm working with a principal who very clearly does not understand the importance of learning through play and exploration. Today, when she came into my room and started to criticize the amazing learning happening that just looked like a chaotic mess to her, I was able to use some of the language and science from your Why We Play series to explain why what my kids were engaged in was not a waste. Mary, that was everything that I could hope for. My goal with the Why We Play series and with the Why We Play letters and with so many of the trainings that I do is to help educators better understand and better articulate to others how powerful this work is and why play matters. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. If you'd like to catch all 9 episodes of the Why We Play series, you can find a link to the whole series in this episode's show notes. You can also learn more about the Why We Play letters and grab a free sample letter at notjustcute.com/whyweplay. As I've said over and over, people don't value what they don't understand. So let's do our best to help others understand and value play. Tammie Benham is one of those amazing advocates for play who has helped so many in her community come to better understand and support play for young children. I am so excited for you to hear about the amazing things that she's doing. If you're wondering how you can use play to better support families in your community, you're in for a treat. Let's jump in. Hi, Tammie. Thanks so much for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Amanda. It's an honor.
Well, I think it's a really exciting topic to talk about, and it's maybe a little outside of the box for some people. So we're going to talk about play in the library, which I think some people, they think of libraries as this quiet place where you just are quiet.
A lot of people think that is definitely the stereotype, and it's my destiny.
I love it.
Definitely my goal to change that, and to help people understand that libraries, public libraries are a place to go to connect to other people and to allow kids to connect and build those social connections, and for families to grow in so many different ways.
I love it. I love your destiny. Well, I want to start first with a little bit of your background. I just always love starting out hearing just a brief kind of the journey that takes you to where you are. There are just so many different disciplines and ways that people touch the lives of young children and families. And so I'd love to hear your story of how you got to where you are and doing what you're doing.
Okay, I can do that. Like many people, my career path wandered around a bit. And I started off teaching elementary school and quickly learned that I liked working with the younger children best. And I had some success working with children with special needs. So I pursued a Master of Science degree in early childhood special education. But before I got into the classroom to teach early childhood special education, I was recruited by a group that was running a training and technical assistance group, and they had a library that provided resources to early intervention and early childhood special education staff. And so I went to work as a librarian without a library degree and quickly went, oh, I need a library degree. Because it's not as easy as people think it is to be a librarian, and you need some pretty specialized knowledge. So I pursued a second master's degree and ended up with a master's in library and information science as well. And that combination of degrees has served me pretty well over the years.
I'm sure.
There's been many times I've been working on one side or the other and brought in that specialized knowledge from the other side to enhance or to contribute to projects. So yeah, that's how I got where I'm at right now.
I love that. And I love that those, you called it a kind of a winding path, but I feel like those different, it brings this multidisciplinary approach because you have those different backgrounds so that you can see it not just as a librarian, not to say just, that's a big thing in and of itself, but you add an extra perspective because of where that path took you. You bring so many different perspectives. And I can see now a little bit of why you see this connection between play and libraries that
absolutely
you can see how that would come into your path. So I have been talking to you about this special, we've actually been in contact for years, and you've talked to me about this family engagement program that you've created in the libraries. And I first met you at a training that I was giving. We were talking about play, and you mentioned that you were bringing play into the libraries. And I got so excited to hear what it was you were doing. So can you share a little bit about that program that you've been building in Kansas, right? And overseeing in many different locations that brings families to the library by using play for young children?
Sure. So it's really great that you mentioned a multidisciplinary approach, because this brought in another discipline, which is really social science. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was a little over 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to write a grant to support a modified version of a nationally recognized program called Family Place Libraries. I had implemented this in a larger community of about 50,000, but now I consult for a group of libraries that is a region that has about 60 small rural libraries. And so I knew that what I had done in that bigger community could be done in these small communities. It took a lot of faith But I really believed that it could be implemented and be successful. And so I wrote this grant through a child abuse uh, prevention grant, and it's a 𝐅𝐫𝐞𝐞 grant that the state had offered, and it's a primary prevention model. So what it is instead of waiting for the abuse or neglect to happen, this is a primary prevention. So we're doing what we can to prevent that from happening. And so they said, okay, we'll have faith in you. We'll try it. I convinced them. Yay. And so what I've been doing is offering these small libraries the opportunity to go through this national training um, and implement the model, but at the same time, looking at how it looks in their space so that we can make sure that we are being responsive to their community. So if it's something doesn't work, we look for a solution. And I'll give you an example of that. But I want to talk a little bit about what the model looks like first.
Mm-hmm.
So the model for Family Place is staff are trained in early childhood development. Yay, they're working with kids, so that makes sense, right?
Right.
They then offer a 5-week play group. They have a parenting collection, which you would typically find in nonfiction adult of a library, but
Mm-hmm.
they take that parenting collection, they augment it, and they move it closer to the children's section, which makes perfect sense. Then
Absolutely.
they don't have to take their child away from the kids section or leave them there to go look for a book on potty training. So that's been a really important piece of this model. A library play space is specifically designed to meet the developmental needs of very young children, birth to 5. And then collaborations and partnerships are formed. And we call this outreach in the library world, but it's really community professionals who offer things like early head start, early intervention, energy assistance programs. So we reach out to them and invite them to come in and say, hey, this is who I am and this is what I do. And if you have questions, please talk to me at the very beginning of a play group. Now, it's not a PowerPoint presentation. It isn't a podcast. It's 5 minutes where they introduce themselves and say, now I'm willing to stay and play with you and your children. And if you have questions, let's talk. And so it makes the conversation more personal and it's developmentally appropriate for the kids as well. So that's been great for outreach and having building a network of professionals in each community that maybe the
Mm-hmm.
librarian hadn't been aware of, but also introducing them to those families. So making those connections has been really important. Then libraries offer additional programs for infants and toddlers, and then outreach to underserved communities is prioritized in the Family Place model. We changed it a little bit. We augmented a little bit by we provide a weekly support group for the library workers who are implementing this program, and that's been a very important piece of this model. I provide professional consultation and support during implementation, which has been really important with the group that I'm working with. And then we also are offering ongoing professional development in the area of early childhood education, which is where you come into the picture.
Right.
And I'm so excited that you're coming to Kansas in the fall to offer some of that professional development.
I'm excited too. And there's so much in that description that I love. And I think this is why you and I hit it off so well. There's so many things that just light me up when I hear you talk. And one is to start off is that piece where you're reaching out to the rural communities and the underserved communities. That's where my heart is. That's the type of place I grew up, and that you do it with that vision that this works in a big city and we want to make sure that we can provide it to all children. Just that aspect of wanting to make sure that if there's something great, let's make sure we make it available for all children, but that you also do it with the lens that we may need to adapt and we need
Right.
to be open and see how we can make adjustments to those programs. And then I loved the piece when you told me the first time about bringing experts in. I did picture exactly what you said does not happen, that these experts come in and give a presentation, right? But I love that the model is you are here to play with your children, and we just want you to know who this person is. And they're here in this room and they're going to get to know you. And if you have a question that is pertinent to you right now, you can ask them that question and they can help you or direct you. And that you're connecting parents with each other and with materials and with the community. There's just so many powerful things that are happening. And then, of course, the layer that these professionals who are trained in library services and have these great skills for library services are also given additional training and support in serving young children. That again, we don't just assume that because they're young children and that it's easy. You were a child once, just do that, right? But
Right.
that we recognize there's a science to it and that we connect them with that science and with those skills to help them do the best possible job that they can with these young children and with these families. There's just so many little pieces that I get really excited about programs like this where maybe somebody first describes it and you think, oh, that sounds cute and simple. And it's not at all. It's powerful.
It becomes very complex.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
It is deep and complex. And I love, love, love that. So the other thing that lit me up, you mentioned that it was based on these protective factors that are intended, well, they're science and research based, that these are factors that prevent child abuse from happening. And I got excited about that because that's an area that I worked in years and years ago, giving trainings, teaching about these protective factors as well. And seeing that there is research behind this, that these factors, like you said, prevent it before it happens. And so again,
Exactly.
this is something that we want to connect for all children, all families, all communities. So can you describe a little bit about what those factors are and how they connect to this program in the library, with the hope that whether someone is listening who works with libraries and wants to implement them that way, but also that anyone who works with young children should be aware of these protective factors and how they play into those roles and can connect families with more of those factors as well.
Sure. So, coming into the library world from the early childhood world, and I also worked in family engagement. So I was aware of the protective factors. And for me, it was really easy to immediately see, oh, guess what they're doing? And they don't even know it.
Right.
So in many instances, it really was just recognizing what they were doing and then using intentionality to do more of the good stuff that was already there.
Yeah,
And
you're
so we
speaking my
built
love
that.
language right here.
Yeah, we built that right in to this model. So the protective factors come from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and it's a framework. And the framework defines 5 protective factors that, when they're very well established in a family, they help reduce the likelihood of child maltreatment. The protective factors are parental resilience, which is the ability to manage and bounce back from all types of challenges through problem solving, relationships, and seeking help when it's needed. Number 2 is social connections, and that's our relationships that can provide emotional support and help solve problems when they arise through reciprocal relationships. So you can help as well as receive the help.
Hmm.
And understanding there's power in that.
Absolutely.
And absolutely, it can help with mindset and mindfulness and all kinds of different great things
And
whenever you need to provide that for someone
right.
else.
And already
Mhm.
with those first two, you can see how these factors are interrelated, that someone's
Yeah,
relationships and their resilience, those are going to be interrelated factors.
for sure. The third one is concrete support in times of need. And those are at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So things like water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, all those things that I heard over and over again. Well, you can't get to working on early literacy if they don't have a place to sleep, and which is absolutely true. We know this. So this helps provide that network that we talked about earlier of professionals for who to reach out to whenever you do have a concrete need, because everyone needs a little help every once in a while. And then when families are in crisis, when these crises occur, we know that if they're able to have the resilience to remember, oh yeah, this is who I reach out to, then it can absolutely reduce stress, which then can reduce the likelihood of child maltreatment. So, like you said again, they all are intertwined. Number 4 is knowledge of parenting and child development. And so this is really important. This is such an important one. And we kind of tend to gloss over when we talk about parenting because there's so much
Hmm.
diversity among parenting styles, right? But if we understand what is developmentally appropriate, and we understand what's typical for a certain age group, it can absolutely decrease the cortisol that washes over our brains when a child is screaming at the top of their lungs because they don't want to leave the library, right? And
Absolutely.
helping not only families understand that, which is part of what we do, but staff, library
Hmm.
staff as well. So that judgment then goes away, right?
Right.
Because they understand, oh, that child's 2 years old. They've been here for a while. They might need a nap or they might need a snack, or it's time for their sibling to be picked up from school. It's fine. So just understanding that, I've seen a lot of staff duck their head or go in the other room because the child's crying and they don't know what to do. Um, but what I teach them to do is say, oh, I'm so sorry you're sad. Or in some cases, just to say, hey, what's going on here? And
Hmm.
I've had children just stop when you ask them, when you're addressing them and you say, what's the matter? And tell you what's wrong. I don't want to leave. And
Right.
then they can be reassured, you can come back. And
Hmm.
many times that's how I've had so many parents just thank me. Oh, thank you so much for helping me get out of the library and not judging us for, being upset as we're getting there. So,
That understanding is huge. For a long time, I've said what looks like patience is often just understanding people say, you're so patient with young children. And I said, I'm not actually, I don't think I'm a very patient person. I think I can be really impatient as far as time goes and wanting to get things done or do the things. But that when you, like you said, when you understand, you just respond differently. I don't think that I have an inherent trait of being patient, but when you understand, it looks a lot like patience. And so you can see how there's a connection there between understanding development and having the a more correct response that is going to lead to healthier relationships and healthier children.
yeah. And just letting the parent know that things are okay also reduces the stress of the child.
Hmm.
So think about it that way as well. So I mentioned a parenting collection before. Of course, that's available in the library, but also we promote um, apps like Vroom, which is free that you can download onto your phone, gives you parenting tips or advice on what to do with your children. So knowledge of parenting is and child development is really important in this model. And then the very last one is protective factor is social and emotional competence of children, which relates to their ability to interact positively with their peers, how to self-regulate their behavior, and how to effectively communicate their feelings. And all of that is a really big part of the play area that I mentioned, and it can impact the quality of life of the children and the families when they have the ability and the opportunity to play in that play area with their peers and practice for life, right?
Right.
For what it's going to be as an adult. So yeah, those are the protective factors. It sounds really simple, right?
Hmm.
Not so much very complex. It's like we talked about before, but what a great opportunity for libraries to intentionally level up and offer something that can absolutely hit on all of those protective factors.
Right. And I love that the vehicle that you've chosen to do that is these play events that you have for families to bring their young children to. And we talked a little bit before, but do you want to share a little bit more about why combining libraries and play is your destiny, as you said, that it fits in with this model and it fits in with your vision for libraries?
Well, we all know that play, if they listen to Amanda Morgan, they know by now that play is how children learn. So why wouldn't we offer them the opportunity to learn in the public library? It makes perfect sense, right? So that's why we set these programs up in that vehicle. And also, you kind of alluded to this earlier. Small rural communities deserve to have the opportunity to offer their populations the same types of programs that bigger communities can afford to offer. So small rural communities often struggle with funding to implement these types of programs. And so it really has been my pleasure and my privilege to offer this to them and say, hey, I'll come alongside you and I'll help you and we'll get this going. And what I'm seeing is really tremendous. So more people coming into the library, more people staying, more people bringing their children for play opportunities, people forming connections, people being introduced to professionals so that they can build that network when they need it. All of those things that we guessed might happen are actually happening. And it's been incredibly powerful with very little modification, really. So we had to think about things like this community is primarily a community that walks because they're one car, one vehicle. And if one of the family members is gone to work, there isn't transportation, so they walk. So if it's raining or snowing or the weather's bad, they're not going to attend the library program. And so we've had to understand and really think about, well, okay, that's going to impact our attendance at programs, and that's okay. Maybe we're going to offer a make and take for another time, or maybe we're going to just commute this program to a different date so that they can have the opportunity to participate. So another example is getting family place model requires families to commit to a 5-week program. And in small rural communities, that wasn't working for us. And it may just be where we're at in the world, but we never could get anyone to do it. So we don't require that families sign up. They can do a drop-in and come to, which we offer them monthly instead of on a 5-week rotating basis, and they can come to whichever ones meet their schedule. So things, small things like that, just that made a lot of sense to change so that the majority of families that wanted to attend could attend.
And I love that responsive quality. I think it translates as we deal with children, but as we work with families as well, that again, it's easy to blame somebody else for not showing up the way you want them to show up. But then when you realize
Right.
you have the power to adapt to meet, if your whole purpose is to meet their needs, then we have to be curious and find out what those needs are and find out where they're at and how we can best meet them. It just shifts that whole perspective so that you can serve them the way that you want to serve them rather than being put out that they didn't show up the way you wanted them to show up, literally in your case, to show up, right? And so
Yeah.
being able to be flexible and responsive is such a big piece there. I think anytime that we're working with humans, if we're serving humans, then responsivity is a key principle there, right?
Exactly. And in this instance, and many times I'll say, okay, so have you considered offering this in a community setting, somewhere that families are already? So for instance, during summer reading program in a public library, which happens every summer, right? I might say something like, have you considered offering your story time during the break at the public pool? Because children are already there, right? In this instance, because it has some specialized equipment, we really do need families to come to the library.
Mhm.
So by being flexible in how we're offering the program, then we are making the chances that they'll show up greater. So absolutely, you're right. It's just like what we talked about with the play groups. We set them that way, not allowing the adults to have the attention at the front of the room because we know it's not developmentally appropriate to expect children to be in this room with all these great toys and they get to play with them and they know that, but first they have to sit still and wait for an adult to. It's not about the adults in this case. It's really about the kids, and the adults are more flexible in how they can behave, and we know that, and we're just being responsive to
Yeah.
that and using that
I love
knowledge.
that. Putting the children
Yeah.
at the center. And I love that idea of going to where the children already are, kind of breaking down the walls that we put up, that we silo the library at the location of the library, but realizing that the
Yeah.
library can come to where you are. And that in turn is going to bring more people to the library. I know I live in a fairly rural area now, and they have, basically like a bookmobile library, a mobile library that will come,
Yeah.
like you said, it comes to the gathering places where the outskirts where we are, that's where the people gather. And so that's where the mobile library will come. And then those people may be more likely to come further, the 20 minutes more to get to the physical library as well, because now they're connected. They're connected with people, they're connected with a purpose. Or if they just physically can't make it to the library, they're still connected with the library. They're still getting the books. And so just that
Yeah.
perspective of where are they, and let's go there. I just love you have such a gift for thinking creatively to
Thank you.
problem solve and to, it's not even problem solve, but to just meet needs, to see them and then meet those needs in whatever way it calls for.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. In this instance, I really think it's just thinking about the bigger picture.
Hmm.
What is our goal? Is it that we get people in the door, or is it that we are connecting children and families with the services they need and providing opportunities for them to connect? And so it really does depend on what your goal is.
Hmm.
And I realize you can have both. I get it. But if you are looking toward and building your program toward that bigger goal, then the smaller goals will fall in line. And we've seen that as well. So we are connecting children and families. We are building those social skills, the bigger goals, right? But we're also seeing that more families are coming into the library, right?
Hmm.
So it's a reciprocal relationship.
I think that's so important to have those principle based decision making, to know, be really clear on what your goals are, what the principles are. And I hear that in what you describe. You are committed to being child centered. Therefore, this is how we structure their connection, not in a presentation, but in access during a play, real authentic play time. That all of those things, when we know, like you said, what our goals are, what our principles are, those decisions become really clear, even when it may feel a little counterintuitive to others. Once you're clear on the goals, then you know exactly what you need to do. So
Exactly.
you mentioned that there are measurable outcomes, but there are also some of these things that are harder to measure. And that's just one of the tricks with social science, that some of the things we value most may be the hardest to measure. And so we have to settle for some of these proxy measures, or just sometimes feel our way through it by being connected to people, right?
Exactly.
And listening and knowing what's going on. So can you share a little bit about what some of those measurable goals and outcomes have been and what you've been seeing?
Yeah. So we really, the things that we measure really are quite different, and we've had to adjust what we thought we were going to measure from the start of the program 2.5 years ago to what we're actually doing now. So at the beginning, we thought, okay, we'll look at the number of families who have been in services that have been identified as a family who maybe at higher risk for child maltreatment, and are they going to come to this program? But in a public library, we're so concerned with privacy that that's not something that we can collect.
Right.
That's something that an agency where they're referred to or ordered to attend a program, that's something they collect. So that had to be really adjusted. If we have concerns about a child's development, we at first were looking at the ASQ, a developmental screener for ages and stages questionnaire, and offering that. But in our setting, with the limited amount of time that we have in libraries, believe it or not, very low paid professionals. You think childcare is bad, libraries are worse. But understanding that that wasn't going to happen in this setting. So what we did is we looked at, okay, so what can we collect? We know that attendance at programs is implementing or is influencing whether or not we meet the goals of the program that as we originally thought they would be, because that then builds social skills. If you have the opportunity and you're there and you're building play dates and you're making friends, which we see and can report. So those outcomes we report as well as the gate counts, the circulation data. So some of that traditional library data is coming in handy because we can look at, okay, did they check out the parenting collection?
Mhm.
Um, and we can report that data as well. But we had a brilliant researcher from KU come up with and implement something called ripple effects mapping. And so what they did was they brought in some of the families that had been participating in this program and some of the librarians that had been offering this program, and myself, and we all sat down together and talked about what has been the impact of this program and really looked at how broadly just attending library programming impacts that family's life, what they're then connected to, what they then choose as a result of being offered this programming. And it was quite powerful. And I really believe that because those families were willing to stand up for this program and go, yes, this is what we see value in. We want you to continue to do this. Then it's providing us the opportunity to write for a second round, because the funders have heard from those families that are directly impacted by this program. So wish us luck.
Oh, absolutely. And it's neat to me to see that balance of both the quantitative data that you're gathering in circulation counts, are they getting the books, how many people are coming, but that we have to look at that qualitative data as well and
Yep.
hear the stories and what are they experiencing, and that you have those families there. And it is a tricky thing where if your overarching goal is preventing child abuse, it's hard to measure without seeing into the future in a crystal ball, right? Do we prevent this from happening, right? But that you can take those other measures, you can take those other protective factors and the best that you can. Like you said, it's in this short window of time that you have, you can't measure every single thing, but it sounds like you've chosen the right things to measure and that you're listening to your families most of all, that
Yeah.
that you hear from them and hear what the program is doing for them and in building community between them as well. Just a
There's
beautiful
nothing
thing.
like yeah, thank you. There's nothing like lived experience,
Mhm.
and having the knowledge of lived experience and the input from those families is one of the things that makes this program successful. And every community we've implemented so far, and it hasn't been broad yet, we're working on it, but every community is seeing similar success. I'm sold on it. I love it. I hope that we can continue to grow, because it, we recognize that play is the best way for children to learn. And this play is just at the heart of everything that we do.
I love it. So you have the great privilege of being able to go into multiple programs because you have spearheaded this program and you're overseeing it and supervising and supporting. So I would love to hear some of your favorite stories from the field, the things that you are seeing, the changes that libraries are making and the impacts that it's having on these families.
Well, I see a lot of families that are coming in that have never been in the library before. I see a lot of families that are coming back after COVID, which has been huge, and daycares. So daycare providers are part of this model as well. Even though you're not directly impacting the family, you're impacting the extended family, the
Mhm.
childcare provider. What I always view the childcare provider as extended family. So part of this model really looks at how is the library professional implementing things like story time. What are they doing when they're implementing story time? Many times, if you've ever been to a story time, a traditional model was one of performance.
Mhm.
So you sit in the audience, you be the partaker of whatever it is I'm going to offer to you. Hopefully you'll be entertained and we're done. And what this model does is it looks at um, what that could be. So I took that and said, hey, what if we did this? What if we used what you're doing, which in almost every instance is a strategy to build early literacy. So this is not a grant that, we said is going to build in early literacy. So we're not measuring that, but we do have the opportunity to work on some of those skills, right?
Mhm.
So I said, let's take that skill that you're demonstrating or you're using, right? So things like knowing how to read a book to a child, teaching them things like how text flows or what an author is or how to read pictures or all of those things we know that build early literacy skills. And um, we use a teach, practice, apply. So let's teach families how to do that. Let's demonstrate that skill for them. Then let's give them the opportunity to do it while they're here. So if they have any questions, they can ask them while they're here, and then they can take it home and apply it in their natural home environment. And so we use that teach, practice, apply approach to do things like story time. So we've really moved from the entertainer or the performer to the facilitator of the relationships between the children and their caregivers. And that's also been extremely beneficial.
And I love that that focus is not just we're teaching early literacy skills to the children, but we are modeling how to support early literacy development to the parents, that that's really who we're modeling and teaching to. And
Yeah.
it's a really powerful opportunity.
Again, that's seeing the bigger picture, right? So I'm not a teacher in this instance, and the librarian is not a teacher. And frankly, many librarians that try to teach don't do a very good job because teaching is a skill set that you learn over time, right? And that's not something that is offered in a library program. So you get some that are naturally great teachers and some that just wing it, right? By the experience that they've had. And in this instance, what you're doing is just demonstrating what you know to be true for an early literacy, how to build early literacy skill, right? And so in that case, what you're doing is breaking it down so far that there isn't a test. It's not a pass fail. It's just a hey, this will work. Try this. This is what the experts say. Try this. So it's an imparting of information, which I guess could be teaching. So maybe you should just cut all that out of what I just said. I'm not quite sure. Librarians, don't get mad at me. You're great teachers, really.
But it's teaching in a different way. It's modeling, it's teaching
Yeah,
parents.
exactly. It is teaching parents, and modeling for parents is important because you have the kids for what, maybe half an hour to an hour in a library setting, a shorter time if they're babies, maybe, and the parents take them home after that. So the rest of the day, they have the opportunity to use what you've taught them, what they've learned from your setting, and and implement over and over again
Yeah.
that skill. And they do that. Kids will sing the Baby Shark song how many times in a row? Um, and so we know that about children, and just using what we know to work. And I think it's a win when the family member comes in and says, they made me sing that song every day between last week and this week. Can we please have another song? Win,
Right? It
yay.
means they're coming back. It means they're practicing it all that week long. They're practicing all those skills, and
Exactly.
it means they're coming back because they need a new song,
Yeah,
right? So we get
right.
retention there. So can you share a few of the things that people have done? So if somebody's thinking play in the library, that sounds awesome, but what does it look like? And I know it looks
Yeah.
different in different places, but what are some of
Mhm.
the things that they're bringing into these play areas?
Yeah. So the most popular thing that I have seen in each of the play areas is usually the kitchen. So the kids will make a restaurant and they'll have a menu and they'll take your order and they'll serve tea, and that's been a huge hit. So think about an early childhood setting, and what are some of the things that you see in an early childhood setting in a daycare, in a really good quality daycare? Baby dolls, the opportunity to dress up, and a mirror so that they can see themselves. And we look at all areas of child development whenever we're considering what to put into these play settings. So thinking about, okay, so do we have some ride-on toys? Do we have the opportunity to practice going up and down the stairs? Do we have the opportunity to write? And again, that extending the learning so that they understand that vertical writing skills are different from horizontal writing skills, and they're working on a different skill set. So again, multidisciplinary approach to whole child development is really important when you're setting up a play setting. So understanding child development, back to that, and not that they have to be an expert. I'm there to guide them. I'm there to find the information if they need it, but understanding that play is the important thing. So what can we offer that entices children to come in and take a closer look and practice some of these skills?
I love that. And we talked in one of our earlier meetings, we talked about, I think you mentioned that STEM has made a pretty good connection to libraries, right? And so we see a lot of libraries that are offering Lego spaces, which is great. That's a great first step. But I love as you talk about dramatic play, what seems at first to be, oh, dress up and kitchen area and all these things that sounds so different from a library. And yet they're acting out stories. It's so connected,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And like you said, to reach all of those different areas of development, that's really that the Lego table is a great first step, but there are so many other areas and types of play that we can be adding in there.
Puppet theater is another one for dramatic
Absolutely.
play. And Legos are great for fine motor skills, and maybe even building the house that the three pigs. But yeah, there's all kinds of different opportunities that we can consider, and all we have to do is make a little bit of space.
And so that was what I was going to ask next. Have you found that and again, this varies, that some places may have the luxury of having a whole room, right, that they can put all these play areas into, or where they can have events. So it rotates and becomes an early childhood. And other places are just trying to carve out a corner. So I was just curious how much space it does take. Have you seen that variety where it
Yeah,
runs the whole spectrum of how much space they're using to do these activities?
absolutely. The littlest library that we've implemented so far, the entire library is 1,700 square feet. So it's a very small library, right? It's not the smallest library we have in our region, but it is the smallest one we've implemented to date. And what they did was we really did a heavy weed on books. And so they've adjusted how they think about what they're offering to children and families and made a tight collection of really new and exciting books that will entice families. And instead of having a lot of things that are on the shelves, now they offer a nice collection. Their shelves are never bare, but they also have a space for children and families to sit and play together. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is have a sitting area that can be used by people with different body types and different ages, so that you don't have someone who struggles to get up and down off the floor not being able to participate because there's nowhere for them to be as well. And whenever you go into a children's department, sometimes you'll see that there is no place for an adult in a children's setting. But if you want children and families to interact together in the children's department, then offering a space for the adults to be as well is important. So we are thinking multi-age, different body types, just being inclusive of, and of course, making sure that ADA compliance is also something that we're considering whenever we're setting up the space.
And then these spaces, you mentioned specific play dates, play events where they were coming once a
Right?
month or once a week, but then you also have areas that are available anytime the family comes into the library, correct?
Right. Yeah. And that's what I was talking about with reducing the collection and making a space. And in the play space, what I recommend is that you have different toys that you set out, but that they rotate in so that you have something fresh coming every once in a while. I happen to work for a library system that has a collection that can loan libraries different things. So that solves a little bit of the issue of keeping things fresh.
Mm.
But on different play dates, then it's a different experience. You want to entice families to come and see what's new or see what you have set up for them. And children, of course, want the excitement of, oh, well, what's going to be there this time? So offering different sensory opportunities, offering, like we said, the ride-on toys. I wouldn't offer them on a typical day in just the library setting. That just is asking for trouble. But if you have a closed room or have an event and people are aware of it, then that's the time and the opportunity to work on some of those gross motor skills as well. So yeah, it is looking at, okay, so what can we offer on a day-to-day basis versus what's a special occasion and what can we offer then?
And I love
For
the
sure.
suggestion of creating a team, whatever library configuration that you have to team up those libraries and then to share those materials. And that it could just be, as you begin, a corner of your children's area where you're just swapping out different play items, sensory items. So there's something new coming each time. If you only have that one little space, just keep that space exciting and keep rotating.
Many companies now will offer busy boxes or I think that's what they're called. But they connect to the wall or they connect to the end of the bookshelf, and they offer the opportunity to work on fine motor skills and problem solving. So things like zippers and buttons and all kinds of different interactive opportunities. So if you have no space in your floor area, you can absolutely connect something to the wall or to your shelving.
I love that. So if someone is listening right now and they are a librarian or work with the library systems or have a great heart for advocacy and teaming up with their libraries, and they're thinking this is a program that would really benefit our community. I want to bring play into my library. What are some of the first steps that you would recommend if somebody's wanting to bring a program like this to their own local library?
Look at what you have. Really look at quality childcare in your town, in your community, and look at how they have their environment set up. Talk to them about why they have it set up the way that they do. Head Start, parents as teachers, nurse home partnerships, or even just your regular childcare. They'll all have that knowledge, and I'm sure that they would all share that knowledge with you. That's a great place to start. Amanda has great resources. You can look and see some play ideas from her as well. They can also check out the familyplacelibraries.org website to look at and explore that model and see whether or not it'll work for their community. They used to offer only in-person training. So I actually went to training on Long Island, which was pretty exceptional. And I feel like I got a lot out of it. I would recommend it to anyone, but if you can't afford that, they do offer virtual training now as a result of the pandemic. So that's another way to get started.
Those are great suggestions. And I just, as I've talked with you, and we've had several conversations, so I have the advantage of several other conversations, but I've really gotten this feeling from you that it's a really big idea and it's a really big passion, but that is no step too small to start
No,
with.
absolutely. Start, get it going. Look at what's happening. A lot of what I'm doing is not original work. It's just pulling at other people's work and putting it together and stringing it together to meet the needs of communities. And I think that's important because we want a place to start. We want a place to implement, right? And just getting started is how you do it and building it from there.
Tammie, thank you so much for the work that you are doing in Kansas and for the inspiration that you've brought to so many other people now who hopefully are getting some great ideas turning for their own libraries. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 71. There, you'll find links to some of the articles and research discussed today, as well as other fascinating tidbits I know you'll find interesting. As I mentioned earlier, Tammie has generously offered to share her contact information to help support and network with others who would like to implement similar programs in their communities. You'll find that in the show notes as well. You can also hit up the show notes for a link to the Why We Play letters. Head to notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 71 or go straight to notjustcute.com/why we play to get signed up and download your free sample letter. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. You can also stay tuned for social media updates on Instagram by following me at Amanda_NotJustCute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.